I want to invite up our first panel, which is entitled It Takes Two to Tango. And your presenter will be Doug Stewart from the Fisher Foundation here in Detroit. And the respondents will be Caen Thomason-Redus, Reverend Larry Simmons, and Mikel Bresee. So please welcome them all to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Bitonti Stewart, and I have to tell you, I woke up this morning and I looked at the speech that I had written for this session, and I tried to decipher how much foundation speak was in it, and I saw a lot. So I decided to scrap it, and instead I'd rather tell you a couple of stories. Although we will hear about operating support, we'll hear about operating endowment, we're going to hear a little bit about collective impact and those kinds of things. But the fact is that I'd rather tell you stories about working together, about a family that gives from the heart, about a family that believes that working with other families is the only way the world changes. And each of those families have to let each other into their hearts to make it work. So instead of the foundation speak, I'm going to try to tell you a few stories, and then quickly move on to our partners here in the discussion, because these are some amazing professionals and leaders in their community that I'd much rather get to quicker than to take too much of your time. So I'm very fortunate to work alongside a family that has some dreams about how the world should change and how they'd like to change the world to make their mark and help repair the world. They just happen to have a foundation that they work with, as opposed to this is a foundation that has a family name. So they really work together. There are 3 generations of the Fisher family that are working very closely together. More than 40 people working together both through volunteering, through their passions and where they're spending time on boards, and also through the foundation, trying to make a difference. But it started with a husband and a wife, and started with Max and Marjorie Fisher. So Max passed away in 2005, but Marjorie is alive and very well at 92 years old. So let me tell you just 2 stories, one about Mr. Fisher and one about Mrs. Fisher. So Max Fisher grew up in Salem, Ohio, and there's a terrific story that takes him from Salem, Ohio to Detroit, Michigan, where he built a business, where he built a family, how he made it to the White House and an advisor of presidents for both the US and in Israel. But what I'd rather tell you is a story about what he perhaps didn't do in 1967, when riots broke out in our beloved city. So Max Fisher, on that day that it happened, he didn't wake up and start to think about metrics of success. He didn't start thinking about what's the solution to this that we can bring to the community. Instead, he called 2 of his close friends, Judge Damon Keith and Arthur Johnson, 2 civil rights leaders in Detroit and in the nation, if not the world. And he said, what can we do together? What tables do we need to get to help in this discussion? What do we need to listen to make this better? And what do we need to bring to this discussion? He didn't say, I've got an idea, and here's what I think we should do. And I'll get these folks together, and we'll do this, and we'll do that. Instead, he said to 2 close friends and leaders in the community, who should we be listening to? Where should we go? Where are the tables where the solutions are already starting to form? And that led to the creation of a handful of organizations, not the least of which is New Detroit, that still acts today working on these very same issues. So he was a collaborator, a convener. So the next story is about Mrs. Fisher. And thankfully, I've had the last 9 years to get to know this extraordinary woman. And one of the first things she said to me when I started this work, she said, you know, all giving starts with your heart. And we've hired you to help us clarify what's in our heart. And then you might need to hire some people to work on getting some things so that we make sure we get our heads in the right place. But all giving starts with your heart, and then we'll use our heads. That was a very clear statement to me. But we began to live it together as the family started to make grants. And she started to respond to them, and she would say things like, so do the people who this grant is supposed to be helping, what do they think about it? What do they have to say about this? Not the people who are working in the organizations, but the people inside the issues. What do they have to say about it? So we had to start answering those questions. Just the last piece on Mrs. Fisher, and I just love telling this piece of the story. And then I'd like to share a little bit about the organizations and our partners that are sitting with me up here on the panel. Is one of my favorite stories and something I'll never forget. My background is fundraising, not grant making. Thankfully, I've been doing it for the last 9 years with this family, but I spent almost 20 years raising money with donors. But I've never heard a donor say this before. One afternoon, I was sitting with Mrs. Fisher, and she was going through with her daughter, Julie, some notes that she received from a handful of children who were in an arts program in Palm Beach, Florida, called Educational Gallery Group. And she was reading these notes from these children, and just barely under her breath, not to me, not to Julie, just to herself, she said, I'll never be able to give enough to make up for how lucky I feel to be able to do this and for these kids to let me in their lives. I'll never be able to give enough to make up for how I feel about these children letting me into their lives. And that was such a clear representation to me and to Julie, and it was an affirmation of who she is, but it was also an affirmation of how we should be doing this work with gratitude. And when we think about grant making, there's a lot of negative language in grant making. Grantee, grantor. Nobody calls themselves a grantee when the funder isn't in the room, right? I never did. There's a lot of that negative language. We actually think that the term nonprofit should be changed. I know that there are people in this room who I know very well don't wake up in the morning to avoid profit. They wake up in the morning to make an impact. They want to break even, and maybe a little bit better than that, but they want to make a social impact. So we actually say for impact. So with this work, and the core message that we brought to these partnerships was that we need to be grateful. We need to realize that when a grant is made or a gift is made, there's two sides to that equation. You can't give someone something without them receiving it. And the folks that we work with, whether inside the issues, the actual families in Brightmoor and our partners in the work, they're giving something to us that we have to open our hearts to receive. And we realize that that is a two-way, it is a partnership. You have to dance. So the theme of this is two to tango. So that dance has to take place, but it's something where we're extremely grateful for the partners we get to work with. So in the short time that I have left in terms of this first part of the presentation, Caen and the Detroit Symphony Orchestra represents a partner that the family has had for decades. Through leadership, through culture change, through all sorts of different iterations of the organization and some strife, the family and the organization and its leaders and its musicians have stayed together and listened to each other about what's needed. And that's brought us to places where we've talked about undesignated support, where the family has moved on to operating endowment, some of the hardest dollars to get, endowment for operations. I know how hard that is to get, having tried to raise that for years. And so that relationship has been strong, and we'll talk more about that. Reverend Simmons and Mikel Bresee are partners of ours, we're partners of theirs in Brightmoor, a neighborhood that you're going to hear more about. But the quick backstory on that is that in the same way that Mr. Fisher, Max Fisher, looked for collaboration and going to tables that were already set and asking questions about how do we work on this together as opposed to bringing solutions, in the same way that Marjorie Fisher, Mrs. Fisher, says that all giving starts with your heart and then you use your head. When the family started thinking about how to engage in Detroit around education and arts and culture, they knew that they wanted to partner in a community and partner with people who also wanted to give us the gift of letting us in. We'll commute in and out. We don't live in that community. But we wanted to be good partners. And it was Brightmoor that started to recruit us, this neighborhood in Northwest Detroit that has this amazing heart and spirit because of its people, not because of the social impact organizations working there. That's important, and the people who work for them. Notice I didn't say nonprofit, social impact organizations. So it is partly because of that, but partly it's because of the parents, the caregivers, the people who work so hard to make the decision to have their child go to a session that Mikel has put together, or go to a session that the Sphinx organization has put together. Through all of the things that they need to accomplish every day, they make a choice to bring the child to that. That's change. That's a gift to us, that they would make that major effort. So you'll hear more about the partnership with the Brightmoor Alliance, our 7 years of work there, their decades and decades and decades of work. And it really is a three-way. This is the last thing I'll say in sort of closing my opening remarks, is to say that I think the title of the session is 2 to Tango, so we would say 3. Yeah. And so what we would say is that it takes people inside the issues. It takes people who are facing the issues every day to share what they believe works, what they've already been working on, what they believe we should do next. It then takes dedicated professionals who dedicate their entire lives to making this community change and work in social impact or for impact organizations. And then sometimes it takes resources to make that work, but sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of stuff that happens with volunteers, but that's our 3 to Tango. The funder sometimes, the professionals all the time typically, and the people inside the issues, which are absolutely all the time. They're working on this every morning. They wake up to make sure that their kids have a better future than they did. So I'll look forward to the conversation, and hopefully you've heard just some of the character traits, some of the values that undergird the family's work with the families in Brightmoor and the families of the DSO and the College for Creative Studies.
That's great. Thank you. And so just in terms of getting to know the audience, how many people here are from the greater Detroit area? Okay. And how many people here know Brightmoor specifically? Okay. Wow. So, Reverend, for everyone else who's in this room, Doug was talking about philanthropy as really an exchange of value, right? Some people have resources, some people have something else. Talk about the value in Brightmoor. Introduce Brightmoor to a room full of people, many of whom don't know it.
Well, I guess I should start by saying 3 to Tango sounds like a menage a trois. Well, I guess it could be the Holy Trinity, too. Depends on your point of view.
This is my kind of church.
I need to let you know that I am a retired politician, so it's going to be hard for me to be clear. I'm a preacher, so it's going to be hard to be brief. And I'm old, so my filters are broken, and I say stuff that really probably shouldn't be said, like menage a trois. But hopefully we'll have fun in this dialogue. Brightmoor is in the northwest corner of Detroit. It is one of the poorest communities in the United States. In some ways, it is like a third world country. Its numbers are similar if you talk about infant mortality in some parts of the community. But like everything in life, Brightmoor is not one thing. It is many different people doing and making it different ways. And in fact, my contention, and I think the contention of others like Reed Schumacher or Jackie Evans or some of the other people who work so hard every day to make the community of Brightmoor the unique place it is that Brightmoor is God's artwork. And I can't remember, you all would know whoever the sculptor was when asked, how do you decide what you're going to sculpt? And he said, the sculpture is in there, I just move away the excess. That's what we do in Brightmoor. All of those ugly buildings that human beings put in the way of God's creation, of the artwork, of the nature of Brightmoor, we remove it. The blight that has been left behind by the post-industrial era of America, we paint over it and put artwork on it and express the human desire to create and to hope. Brightmoor is the best and the worst of humanity. You can walk down the street and see someone selling her body or his body on the street for money, and then walk up to a community kitchen decorated by people who live in the community or who come because they want to help. You can walk in one part of Brightmoor where my church is, and you will be in one of the most rapidly depopulating areas in urban America. It looks like, in fact, I call it the prairie. You can look through and see block after block of nothing but greenery. You can go 5 blocks over and up, and you'll find an area densely populated with almost, in fact, since the Fisher Foundation and Skillman have come along, we've actually turned the depopulation rate in our community through the collective work that's going on. So it's a diverse place, but the truth, or I guess the big churn, is the grind of poverty and all of its associated things. So I'm going to tell a quick story, and then well, 2, because you know I'm a preacher, so I can't do 1. I guess you do 3 points. That's in the sermon, but that's an aside. So there's a young man, I'm not going to call his name, who has difficulty staying in school. I'm mentoring this young man, or I was, when I could stay in touch with the family, and so I had taken him to the library up on Grand River near Lasser. And he was, bored to tears and looking through, trying to find video games. And lo and behold, somebody marches in with this great big thing, looks like a violin on steroids, and sits down and begins to play the cello. He comes to a screeching halt, sits down at the table, and for the next 20 minutes, he is transported into another place. Who knew? Who knew? This is a partnership and gives me insight into how to help him get back onto this path of prosperity. Maybe we've been trying to force his square peg into round holes. The other story is one of a gentleman who I won't name because this is being recorded, who loves this community and who for years, before anybody even used the word blight, decided that he was going to do something about it. And so what he did was, he and his friends got some hammers, and they went to houses that were blighted and were havens for drug dealers, and they started knocking them down, literally, with their hammers. And then more people joined them with their hammers, and then 20 years later, a movement started, and there's now a big movement in Detroit to get rid of all the blight. But it started in Brightmoor with one guy who said, I've had enough, and I don't want my neighborhood to look like this. Coming in alongside of him was the Fisher Foundation. They said, we like what it is that you're doing. And so they began to work with him, partnered with us at the Brightmoor Alliance, and we've been working with this gentleman as he is bringing his creative reconstruction of Detroit more in line with the law. And more, not all the way there yet, but he's getting there, he's close. So, but the point is, the thing about Brightmoor that you need to know, we don't wait on anybody to come and tell us something needs to be done. There are farms before anybody thought that there was a thing called urban farming. There were prayer parks before anybody thought that vacant fields could be cleared and made into a place where people could pray. And there are houses being repurposed for things like stages and community centers that everybody else thought should be torn down. So if you're looking for an interesting place to get involved, to take an alternative path of development, come to Brightmoor. Because I'm telling you, we can find something for you to do, and most of it's legal.
That's great. Now, Michael, you're doing some legal things in Brightmoor, aren't you?
I hope everything I'm doing is legal.
So talk a little bit about how CCS came to Brightmoor and the work that you're doing there.
Great. Well, CCS is in this three-person tango. It kind of has the role of the professionals. So for those who don't know, College for Creative Studies is one of the top art and design colleges in the nation, actually in the world. Our transportation design program brings people from Korea and France and Italy. So we're really very much an international center of art and design. I was brought kicking and screaming from the city of Chicago 16 years ago to start a community outreach program called Community Arts Partnerships. So I probably share a lot of the same challenges that Caen shares, being with the DSO, in starting from this world-class institution with all of these resources, but having a commitment to doing neighborhood-level work how can you get from here to there? And it's surprisingly difficult. I don't know how many people here work in large-scale professional organizations, but trying to get those organizations comfortable with what it takes to work in the neighborhoods is very interesting. I'll give you an example. You know, I went to we developed a public art program, which we do in Brightmoor, but we do it in several other neighborhoods. And we went to the foundation sponsor and said, well, we want to do this community and public art program, and we're going to go into these neighborhoods where there's not a lot of art going on right now, and we want to rally the residents and figure out what we want to do, and do some public art that's going to bring people together. And they said, well, that sounds great, so tell us about your projects. I said, I can't tell you about our projects. We don't have any projects. Well, you're asking for $300,000, right? I said, yeah. You're going to do some projects, right? Yeah. But we don't know what those are going to be because we haven't met the people that we're going to be working with yet. We haven't sat down with them. So this program, Community and Public Art Detroit, develops these large-scale public art projects, but it takes us 2 years because that first year, the entire first year, is planning and meeting the neighbors and getting to know what's wanted and needed in the neighborhood. And Pastor Simmons has been just an incredible liaison to the community. So I think, you know, and in the opening statements, there was a lot of conversation about not bringing, it's hard for an organization that thinks of itself as a world-class resource organization to not go into a neighborhood thinking, I'm bringing the solution. That's really difficult. I first started that with working with the Art Institute of Chicago many years ago in Chicago. It was really difficult for them in the 80s when nobody was doing it. So it's very difficult. But, you know, we've been able to kind of build some infrastructure, and we've been able to, you know, take our time and do it right and meet the right partners. And what we've discovered is that, you know, what lasts, the problem with the bring the solution model is it doesn't last. It only lasts as long as the professionals are in. So what we came about very quickly is our goal is not to bring the solution into the neighborhood. Our goal is to work with the neighborhood to build a community infrastructure for the arts. And I love when Pastor Simmons was saying, you know, talking about all the arts in Brightmoor, he never once mentioned the College for Creative Studies.
I'm going to.
Well, that's fine. You don't need to, because that whole idea is that the College for Creative Studies has not done that artwork.
Right.
That artwork was done by people in
community.
Brightmoor. A lot of the artwork that you're seeing on the screens is artwork that was done in our programs. It was done by young people in Brightmoor. As much as possible, we even try to get the artists from Brightmoor, bring them into the program, train them, and give them the resources. So really, I think it's for those larger organizations, and I'd be interested to hear Caen's take on this, it's not how can we bring what we have to the neighborhood, it's how can what we have empower the neighborhood to use those tools and techniques to express itself. We certainly don't want Brightmoor expressing the College for Creative Studies. And it's the last thing we want. We want Brightmoor to be expressing Brightmoor. And I hope we've done that, you know, somewhat well.
That's great. Caen, I'm going to come to you with a question in a second, and then we're going to open it up to the room. So the room should start thinking. Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Do you have things you want to poke on? Do you have things you want to ask folks to go into more? In a lot of my work, Caen, I pay a lot of attention to signal words, and certain words are triggers, certain words are dangerous, and I think world class are certainly dangerous words. I think institution can be a dangerous word. You work for a world-class institution. How do you sort of push through the baggage that normally comes with to get to the work that you wake up every day to do?
Yes, indeed. That is a good question. The Detroit Symphony is a world-class institution in all of the best senses of that phrase. So I appreciate you saying that. And you're right, that does have baggage that goes along with that. And particularly, I think the world of classical music, maybe more than the world of visual art, has those institutional associations with it as an art form. You know, it can be seen as something that is incredibly exclusive, whether it's because the instruments can be hard to keep and maintain and learn, or the tickets may be expensive, or any number of reasons. There's a lot of ways that we try to get past all of that and to get into the community, and there's some challenges in the way of those that I think you guys are starting to discuss, and it'd be great to get to. One of the things is that, of course, there's not just one way to be in a neighborhood. There's not one way to convey an art form. So when you're dealing with something like an orchestra, it's very easy for a community, for an individual, for anybody to just assume that it is the orchestra, and that for the orchestra to have impact, you must roll in a semi and 85 musicians and a conductor, and bestow upon the world your gift of orchestral music. And it is a gift, but that's not the only way. That's one very, very important way, and we do that. But it's also through the small ensembles of anywhere from 1 to 5 to 8 to 12 of those 85 musicians that work differently when they're in small groups. It's going in and teaching lessons. It's going in and talking about what it takes to become an orchestral musician, which, just like many other things of value, is years of hard work and focus and dreaming and determination. And those are all the messages that, whether it's the kids at Gompers in Brightmoor, or just the people that maybe come to a free concert that we have, like seeing the rewards, both individually for the musicians and communally for the audience. Seeing those rewards is proof that hard work is worth it, that the collaboration involved is worth it, and we show that in a lot of ways. Also, just noting that place, as important as place is changing right around us. Place is, for us, Orchestra Hall, our home. Place is a neighborhood venue. Place is a community venue where we have a chamber ensemble. Place is your computer or your phone where you may be watching one of our webcasts. And I have sat in a Michigan State Park campground with my cell phone out watching a webcast of the DSO with my kids, and them standing up and clapping when it was time to clap. That is a form of accessibility that is incredible and unique to our era. And we try very hard at the Detroit Symphony to leverage that, to get past those assumptions that come up when you invite somebody to an orchestra. A lot of people assume that an orchestra is not for them, and part of what the DSO is about, and part of what our field is about in general these days, is proving that something like an orchestra is many, many things, and many of those things are beyond anything you would have imagined, and that it can have relevance for your life. And for many of us, for thousands and millions of us, it has great meaning.
That's great. All right, who wants to ask the first question of SphinxCon? First question, first comment? Something burning in your hearts, in your minds? You can do a short speech disguised as a question? Absolutely. All right, well, while you're thinking, let me pick up on that assumption thing for a minute. Because I think in philanthropy, certainly in higher education, certainly with religion, certainly in the Brightmoor neighborhood, certainly with the Symphony, people show up with a lot of assumptions. I assume I know what my relationship is going to be with the foundation. I assume I know what my relationship is going to be with the symphony orchestra. Just on a very fundamental level, how do you begin getting people to articulate and understand the assumptions that they're carrying into interactions with us, so that we can begin pushing through them and understanding Brightmoor as both a neighborhood that has blight and as God's palette? That we can understand the symphony as, we are the symphony and we are here to deliver music, and also this is an amazing thing and we would love for you to be a part of it, and all of that.
Well, I think as kind of where we started, like the structure that leads to these things happening is part of where the change can happen. If music, if art, if community engagement happens through funding, and if in the pursuit of funding you have to prove that you are the expert, that doesn't exactly always allow for that exploratory discovery phase. That, for instance, if you're in science, if you're in engineering, you're not expected to start with your finished product. You're expected to enter into a process. If you're doing a science grant, you don't necessarily want to have your deliverable be the retail version of the life-changing product that you're going to get to. You may be just trying to prove or disprove some element that's going to bring really important information in that path. So if we're starting from the point of having to be the expert, we've already bypassed the community that we're trying to serve. We maybe haven't had that time and space to sit down with the community. You know, that time and space is incredibly important, but that's capacity, that's time, that's people. I would love, I mean, I spend a lot of people here can vouch, I spend a lot of my time speaking with really important people around the community, and by important, I mean important because they are part of the community. They're not just part of our staff, and I cherish that time, but that's, you know, that time is demanding, and we don't have as much as we need, and if that time were allowed as part of the process a little more often than it currently is, I think we could get past a lot of our own assumptions, because I think it does start with us as the purveyors of music or community impact. I think we need to start from a point of assuming that we do not know what we need to know about the people that we are trying to work with.
Yeah,
Good point.
Interesting. Yeah, Doug, let me come to you and then.
I would just pick up on that and say that part of it is time, and then realizing that it takes time to realize that you were wrong. And this is on however many sides of this tango. So we've been in partnership with Brightmoor now for 7 years. And some of the assumptions we went in with, things like maybe there may be a response to us because we're not from the community. But the time that the family, and I think I said 3 generations when I started out, there's 4. There's 4 generations, and all 4 of those generations have been in Brightmoor. Mm-hmm. And so it's about the time. It's about being there when something isn't being presented. It's about being there when conversations are taking place that you didn't set up or didn't come to hear specifically, and taking the time, as Caen said, to really live in it. And sooner or later, and this happened early for us, but people will say, well, that's not right, you know, and this isn't right, and so on. And so I think it takes time and the ability to listen and let it in.
I want to emphasize that because having worked in so many different venues, if the people at the top don't hold value for the work and the people who are in engagement in the work at the production side, you don't get that kind of time and you don't get that kind of interest. Mike and I had a big falling out about a year ago over a project that we're working on. But we worked through it because he brought, and I hopefully brought, an attitude that this is really not about either he or I, but the community that we both love and serve. When I first met Doug, I don't know if you remember this, but we were having a meeting of the Brightmoor Pastors Alliance, and we were all over Doug about the way they were financing food distribution in the community. But because of who they are, and I think that starts at the top, there was an ability to come together and to form incredibly strong relationships. And like any relationship, there are going to be times when you won't agree, when you have to work through to some way to either live in disagreement or to modify or modulate your perspective or the other to come to agreement. I know as artists, you all never have those kinds of situations with one another, but in the community, we have them all the time. And so it's really important that the partners enter with the attitude. And this is much more difficult for the person in the power position with the money. Because in our community, in our world, you pay the cost to be the boss. And to have someone who has the money come with that point of view is very rare, very rare. A lot of organizations come with lots of money, but few come with lots of money and open minds.
Michael, come on.
I think in terms of assumptions, you know, one of the assumptions obviously is that we're the experts, right? So I think one of the ways to, as one of the larger organizations, one of the ways to kind of deal with that assumption right off is respect. Mm-hmm. I think respect for the community is very important. And where we start our conversations with communities in our public art process is what are the challenges here in the community and what are the opportunities in the community. And I think a lot of big organizations look at underserved communities and see the challenges. I think often enough, we don't see the opportunities. We don't see that there are artists in the neighborhood. There are already people here doing art. There are already beautiful things in this neighborhood. And the first thing that we've got to do is find out who those people are, find out where those things are, what's going on, and to show those people and those activities that are already taking place on the ground the respect that they're due. And sometimes I think getting that respect from the quote-unquote big organization, the professional organization, really is sometimes as important as the money. To really, come to people in under-resourced communities with, your resources and say, wow, you're really doing amazing work with what you've got. The question is not, what different things can we do? The question is, how can we support your work and build your work? What resources can we bring in that are going to help you and what's already going on? That way, a great story about when the Brightmoor Community Center closed. Now, we were doing a program at this community center and we got a call on Thursday that the center was closed and our program wasn't going to happen on Saturday. But after 4 or 5 years in the community, it took us about 12 hours to find where our Saturday program was going to be within that community. We didn't have funds to pay for it. It was just, social capital. And that Saturday, we had that program going in that same community at a different location. But that was just, if we were on our own and trying to think we were the guys with the resources, we would have been SOL there.
Right. Excellent.
Right.
Please, join us.
I need help working through this question. So when you say you're from within the community, and how do you explain, or is it a little arrogant to say you don't need another basketball court? Do you understand? You know how you say you don't know that you don't know, but are you being presumptuous and to say that, what's the word? Help me work through it. A little elitist, that wouldn't be it, to say, oh, no, you don't need another basketball court. That might not be, now I know there's people in here with Ivy League degrees that can help me work through this.
Right. I don't think you need any help. I think the question's pretty clear, right?
Okay.
Different people walk into a situation and bring different experiences with them. And there's the experience of the people who live there, and there's the experience of the folks that are coming to partner, and there's the experience of everyone else. And sometimes they're not in alignment. And sometimes someone says, I know what's exactly right for this community, and sometimes the community says that's not what we need right now. And how do you negotiate that? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, how do we,
So let me throw that out. How do you, this is an epistemological question.
We don't need another
right?
basketball.
There's lived experience, right? There's lived experience, there's learned experience, there's I've been doing this for a long time experience. How do you negotiate that? How do you begin? Let me start with the Reverend, then we'll come to Caen.
That's fair.
Okay, put him in the spot. So I'll come from the Reverend point of view. I believe God gives people vision, and I don't believe everybody gets the vision. And you have to have the courage of your vision. And if you don't think there needs to be another basketball court, you need to stand up and say, we got 15 of those, we don't need 16. And then you have to be willing to engage and make the case. Now, it may be well that you will lose in that instance, but the one thing about this, and I would say this, I'll take this privilege of age, know this, for all of you folks whose hair is still black or brown, this is going to last a long time. And even though you may lose that battle, you are setting yourself up to win the next one. And so you make your case as well as you can make it with the vision you've been given to make it. And then you work with your community. And over time, when they see you build that other thing, perhaps instead of a basketball court, it's an outdoor learning lab. Maybe it's just a walking space. I don't know if that picture is in here, but if you Google Brightmoor housing, there's a house that's going to pop up that's green, that's got Brightmoor Farmway on it. That house has been demolished, but the community preserved the art and created a walk-through space with that instead of a basketball court. So I would say have the courage of your vision. You don't have to be obnoxious, but you do have to have the courage to stand up for what you see.
Caen, join me.
Yeah, excuse me. I was going to say, as the the community engagement professional in the mix of this this trio, we'll call it, that the way we can avoid proposing a basketball court to those who may not want a basketball court is to not be selling basketball courts, but to be experts on what it is that we, and in this case as musicians, are good at and what value we can bring, and not to say, therefore we have calculated that what you need is this, but instead that we then sit down with you, whoever you are from the community, and find out what your problems are and what your goals are, and it's our job to help dream and envision and articulate how music and the arts and arts education can address those problems and those goals. So we don't start with our retail product and say, here's the solution for you. We may have retail products and we may think they're great, and we do. But how we use them, what other products we have, what process we go through, who we bring, all of that, that's all part of that conversation. And it's really just a problem-solving scenario rather than a pitch or a deal.
That's right. We're actually right at the end of our time together, and I want to close with a lightning round, taking AFA's opening very seriously. This is a room full of people that have gathered together. They've listened to you guys speak for 50 minutes now, and we want folks to leave and do something differently tomorrow. So in a sentence, in a word, in 2 sentences, what should people leave here and do differently tomorrow? Let me start with Doug, and we'll come right down.
If you work for an organization that makes decisions about grants and allocating resources, think about the long term. Think about administrative expenses. Think about that it takes money to run these organizations, and think about that. If you're inside the community and you see something that's not working, but you see the foundation's names on things, call up those foundations. Call up the organizations that are doing that work and say, I want to meet with you. I want to talk with you. And see if they'll listen and open their hearts to you and hear what you have to say, because you are the powerful ones in this whole thing. You are.
Great. Michael.
Listen. Listen, listen, listen. Meet, listen some more, meet again, listen some more.
Excellent. Reverend Simmons.
If your partner wants a tango and you want to do the stanky leg, have the courage to separate.
Caen, top that.
What do I do with that? Here I am thinking inspirational stuff, and he's going to that. So, for something different, what came to mind was that I believe very much in the impact of the arts, and I think if each of us in our life thinks about the impact the arts has had on us, if we then imagine somebody that is not having that access at the moment, then it's our job to be creative and figure out what our slice of the arts world can do for that person or that community. And we do that every day.
Excellent. So with that, please join me in thanking the opening panel from 2016.